Entrepreneurship, Chapter 11, Anticipating Failure. Many startups fail, businesses fail. Failure can fuel development. Many fail because there's so many different reasons why they can fail. Businesses fail. And failure can become a fuel development, and it becomes a pattern. Common reasons for startup failure. Small, adjustable, informative businesses have sometimes tried to link to higher objectives and goals, and sometimes they're too lofty, and it can cause you to fail because you're trying to do too much with too little. Rigid thinking in terms of how you always think, and think in terms of regimented and not being able to be swayed. And when you make these kind of mistakes and your business fail, results can be pretty bad. It can result in reputational damage. And once your reputation gets damaged, then it's hard to do business with people, sell to customers, or do business with other folks. Common reasons for startup failure, contributing factors. Lack of business model, poor planning. Meaning you have to have the right type of model for your business. For instance, if you have a retail business, don't have a business model that's for manufacturing. If you're trying to get your timing right, you can have the right type of business and right plan and everything else. If your timing is bad, that can put you under too. And I'll give you an example. There were some businesses that actually, unfortunately, had bad timing when it came to COVID. And because they tried to start it right before COVID hit or right when it hit, and they didn't make it. Funding discrimination. This is when you have funding that could actually be, people could be discriminated based upon their race, creed, or color, or sexual orientation. Pivoting after mistakes. This is where you find a situation where if you make a mistake, then you want to make a hard pivot, to go in another direction. Well, see, that's a mistake right there, because stay the course, learn from it, and try to do something within your scope of what are you trying to do. Don't change and try to do something different. Edmondson's belief. Amy Edmondson was a Harvard professor who basically looked at the beliefs failure spectrum. It goes from small, medium, to large, and all the things in between, because there's just so many different things that can go wrong that can cause failure. Failure can have positive outcomes. Failure can have a positive outcome, and I'll give you a failure, a healthcare failure, a medical pharmaceutical failure that turned out to have a positive outcome. Viagra was initially designed for men with heart trouble. When they did the studies on it, the patient said, "Hey, well, this doesn't appear to be helping me in my heart situations, but they did say it's beginning to help me with my sex life." And that's when they discovered they actually had something that was actually, it failed for treating heart problems, but it helped in treating male erectile dysfunction. So they can have a positive outcome. Deviance leads to mismanagement. Deviance is when you have people who do things that are unethical, immoral, illegal. A lot of times when they do that, it's a recipe for disaster, because that can have legal ramifications, but it also sets you up at some point in time too for developing a reputation for not being reputable if you don't run a opposite side of the law. Getting sidetracked by inattention. You can't get caught by shiny new objects. Every time they come up, something pops up, you can't go chase it. You have to stay true to your course, whatever you're doing. You can look at other things, but they can't distract you from what it is, your task at hand. Lack of ability. Do you have the lack of ability to do the things that you want to do? For instance, you're endeavoring to create something or market or sell something, but do you have the ability to be able to do that? If you don't, that can set you up for failure. Process inadequacy. Do you have the proper process in place when it comes to the communications and internal controls, the things that you have to set up to actually do what it is you're endeavoring to do? Communication breakdown. This is when the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. If you have a situation where you're trying to have, you don't have good communications, it can break down a lot of times, and somebody not know. For instance, marketing has to know what's going on with the manufacturing. They got to be working in together. You got to have communication and stuff. Uncertainty can cause unreasonable actions. Because uncertainty sets in, sometimes people panic and they start doing things as unreasonable, and they're operating, their actions are being driven by the uncertainty. You can't allow that to happen. You have to know everything you do has to be strategic and not reactionary. Exploratory experimentation. A lot of times people will not do this at the very beginning. Explore different experimentations, try to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and what's good for your business and what's not good for your business. Don't wait until you get in your business and then try to figure those things out. Many try to avoid failure, and this is a mistake. You shouldn't try to avoid failure, because failure is a learning process. You learn by doing. Most people learn by doing. And by trying to avoid failure, you're basically trying to avoid the learning process. Failure provokes emotional reaction. For some people, it does. It can provoke an emotional reaction, and now you're being driven by emotions and not logic and rationale. Emotions, entrepreneurs experience. Entrepreneurs have emotions and stuff, but you can use those to your advantage too. You have good emotions and bad emotions. The thing is, you can't let the bad ones drive what you do. The good ones can be good. For instance, if people respond to good emotions, so that can be good for entrepreneurs. Hard to separate personal from professional. If you have a personal failure, that may not be a professional failure. Don't treat it as such. Understand the difference between the two. A personal setback doesn't have to be a professional setback. Entrepreneur fear of failure dimensions. Origins of fear. Research has shown that origins of fear goes back with most of us to our childhood. And that's based on our upbringing with our parents, our community, our religion, our faith, our culture, our ethnicity. So a lot of that can be tied to that. The belief that failure is unacceptable. That right there is almost unrealistic. Failure it doesn't have to be something that you embrace, but it has to be something that you're prepared for. So know that it is acceptable, but you know that it's coming, and know when it does come, you know how to deal with it. That's a mental strategy. View failure as judgment oriented. So when you look at it, you look at judgment oriented experiences. Learn to improve skills, compete with them as you view, and don't allow these things to be judgment oriented to the point where you feel like you are a failure or the business is a failure. It may just be a setback. Avoiding mistakes stunts growth. It does. Again, mistakes can be part of the learning process. So trying to avoid them will stunt growth. Coping strategies. What type of strategies do you have to cope with failure? Are you have things in place to help you mentally prepare for that? Are you prepared for those things when they happen? Some people not. So it's kind of like getting gut punched, and they weren't expecting it. When you are in business, you understand that failure does happen periodically. And so you know what? You get gut punched. It hurts, but you knew it was coming, versus somebody who had no clue it's coming. And in boxing, they always say you get hurt by the punches that you don't see. Allow yourself to feel fear. Learning how to cope with fear, you learn how to fear. Allow yourself to feel fear, then you learn how to cope with it. And you get familiar with it, and you develop a mechanism for it. Seek support for role models. Find people who've done similar things that you do. People you can look up to, people who will understand, and people who will give you encouragement. Global fear of failure, fear rooted in national culture. Because America is a melting pot, we have people from all walks of life and all different cultures. And what you find sometimes in some cultures, you'll find that fear is viewed as a failure and a setback. People are, when it comes to, perceptions, we have these different perceptions based upon who we are, where we come from, our culture, religion, our gender, our sex, our race, our education. All these different things come into play to determine people's personal perceptions. Learn from others. Talk to others who have walked where you're trying to go. People who have been there, and you're walking in their path, in their shoes. Talk to them to learn from them. How do they deal with fear? How did they accept it? Fear is an intentional iteration and stuff. Look, sit down and come up with testing and process and analysis to try to figure out how to overcome it. This is your intentional iteration. Intelligent failures are failures that when you make mistakes and they're failures, but you learn from them and you are better as a result from it. Maybe not even in the sense the way with the business you're looking at, but it might be in another way. But you are more intelligent as a result of making that mistake. Lessons learned from successful entrepreneurs. So you had Kirk Theobald of Classy Llama. This guy failed at his attempt to be an entrepreneur 10 times. He was unsuccessful. The 11th time he was successful and turned it into a multi-million-dollar industry. And that was because he stayed the course. He didn't view failure as a setback. He viewed it as a learning opportunity. And each time he learned more and he felt like he became more intelligent. And now he's a very successful businessman. Building a blame-free culture. Blame culture isn't healthy. When we're looking to place blame, we're looking to do something that's a reactive thing. That's not a strategy. Strategy is trying to find out, look at what went wrong and try to figure out how to come up with a way to overcome it. Blame is trying to place it somewhere else because, the fear of failure has gotten you. So somebody's got to take the blame for it. Encourage learning from failure. And how do you encourage learning from failure? And it's a lot of times is this. Ask the type of questions. Ask questions such as this. Mike, so what went wrong? And Mike tells you what went wrong. So Mike, what could you have done differently? And Mike tells you what he had done differently. See, that's what he's learned. So Mike, how did you like to proceed? Now Mike has learned and now he's strategizing. Now he's telling you. Ask those kind of questions. That's when you view learning from failure. Building a blame-free environment. Avoid negative reactions. If you are the type of person that does not respond well to bad news or failure and reactions, when people come to you, guess what? They'll stop coming to you and they'll stop telling you things. You don't want that. Be type of persons like avoid those. Be realistic and stuff. Communicate acceptable and unacceptable failures. Let them know what is a learning failure and what is a failure. A failure that puts you out of business is not an acceptable failure. A failure that causes you a couple of hours on the assembly line, that can be a learning opportunity. Talk to people as such about those. And don't have negative reactions when they tell you things you don't want to hear. Try to be, I won't say try to be positive, but try to be objective. Resilience is important for managing stress. So when it comes to managing stress, resilience is very important. If you think in terms of this, I'm going to tell you exactly the definition of resilience. Take a rubber band and pull it, both of your hands and pull it apart. Stretch it. Now release it. There's your definition of resilience. The rubber band was stressed when you stretched it out. When you released it, it went right back to its form. That's resilience. And that's what people have to be in this type of business. An entrepreneur, you can't let things stress you out to the point that you lose track. Go right back to where you were and refocus. Grit enables people to sustain interest. So this is when you think in terms of grit, this is what people, ability to work hard and sustain interest in long-term goals. So grit versus resilience. So you have your passion, perseverance for long-term goals. So yeah, when you think in terms of that grit is the ability to stay focused and do hard work. Perseverance is the ability to say, the resilience is again, the rubber band, snap back. The fixed versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset is people think they're born naturally smart, and that's the only way they get smart. Growth mindset is I can get smart by doing. Concept of deliberate practice. When you think in terms of deliberate practice, this is when we have a conscious effort to try to do things that you may not be able to do. But guess what? By each time you do those, you get a little bit closer to being able to do it, and you learn something from each one of those endeavors. Psychological resilience and mental health. So response process to adversity. How do we respond process to adversity? Do we respond in a manner that's negative? Or do we respond to a manner in which that, we expect adversity and we expect to overcome it? Entrepreneurs can develop resilience. You can practice this. It's things that you can do to practice that. It's primarily mental. It's where it happens at. It's all mental. Staying committed and handling stressors. Staying committed when times get hard is difficult for some people. They want to try to pivot and go do something else. Stay pivot, committed, handle those stressors, because guess what? It doesn't stay stressful all the time. And then by handling those stresses, you get used to doing that and you're ready for the next set of stresses when they do come. When we look at developing resilience, emotional, this is the mental part, our emotions, how we feel. The cognitive is how we think. The social factors is our friends and family, our network around us. Also, rely on prior experience. If you have a history of being successful and overcoming, rely on that. Fall back on that, because if that's what your history shows, then that's what you'll do in the future. Removing the stigma of failure. Exercises to help remove the stigma. You have to understand the stigma of failure is something that it permeates throughout society and stuff. You have to constantly work at trying to overcome that. Again, this is mental that you'll need to work on. And there are books that you can read to help you with that. And also talking to others would be very instrumental. That concludes chapter 11.